Football is a game of passion, joy and unforgettable moments, but sometimes it also delivers heartbreak in the most brutal ways imaginable. From last-minute collapses to cruel twists of fate, the sport has given us some of the most gut-wrenching moments that left players and fans in tears. Today we're diving into 10 of the most heartbreaking moments in football history. Get ready because some of these will still hurt no matter how many years have passed. Let's get to Karius's horror show. Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool had defied expectations to reach the 2018 Champions League final, setting up a clash with the dominant Real Madrid side that had won back-to-back titles. The Reds came in as underdogs but started with the energy and intensity that had defined their season. However, what followed was a nightmare for goalkeeper Loris Karius. Early in the second half, a moment of madness saw Karius attempt to roll the ball out, only for Karim Benzema to stick out a leg and deflect it into the net. Sadio Mane quickly equalised, but then came Gareth Bale's stunning overhead kick, one of the greatest goals in Champions League history. Liverpool still had hope, but Karius's night went from bad to worse when he fumbled a long-range strike from Bale into his own net, sealing the win for Madrid. As the final whistle blew, Karius was in tears, knowing that those errors would define his career. While Liverpool went on to conquer Europe the following season, that night in Kiev remains one of the most heartbreaking moments in their modern history. Number 9. Baggio's biggest regret. The 1994 World Cup final between Brazil and Italy came down to one defining moment. Roberto Baggio, Italy's talisman, stepping up for the final penalty in the shootout. Baggio had carried Italy through the tournament, scoring crucial goals in the knockout rounds, but on that fateful night at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, his story took a cruel turn. With Brazil leading the shootout 3-2, he needed to score to keep Italy's hopes alive. Instead, his shot soared over the crossbar, handing Brazil their 4th World Cup and leaving Baggio frozen in devastation, hands on hips, staring into the abyss. It was an unfair ending for one of football's greats, but the image of Baggio's heartbreak remains one of the sport's most iconic and heartbreaking moments. Number 8. Hand of God. Diego Maradona's Hand of God is one of the most infamous moments in football history. In the 1986 World Cup quarter-final against England, Maradona opened the scoring in dramatic and controversial fashion. Rising to challenge Peter Shilton for a loose ball, he punched it into the net with his left hand. Despite furious protests from the England players, the referee let the goal stand and the world was left stunned. Just minutes later, Maradona produced pure genius, dribbling past half the England team to score the goal of the century. While Argentina went on to lift the trophy, that quarter-final will always be remembered for a moment of deceit that left England and the footballing world outraged. Number 7. The most disgraceful refereeing. The 2008-9 Champions League semi-final between Chelsea and Barcelona should have been remembered for Michael Essien's thunderbolt and Chelsea's sheer dominance. Instead, it's now one of the most infamous refereeing disasters in football history. Chelsea dominated, leading through Essien's goal, but then came 4 blatant penalty shouts. Dani Alves dragging down Malouda, Abidal pulling down Drogba, Piqué's clear handball, and finally Eto'o blocking Balak's volley with his arm. Every single one was waved away. Then, in stoppage time, Iniesta's stunning strike sent Barcelona through on away goals, leaving Chelsea furious. Referee Tom Henning of Rebo later admitted he had made mistakes that night, but it was too late. Chelsea fans still look back at that match with fury, knowing that with VAR, history might have been very different. Number 6. Lampard's disallowed goal. England's early 2000s were filled with heartbreak in major tournaments, whether it was penalty shootouts or crushing exits. By the time they arrived at the 2010 World Cup, expectations had dimmed, but there was still hope that their squad, featuring some of the Premier League's finest, could make a statement. Facing a strong Germany side in the last 16, England battled back to 2-1 and were pushing for an equaliser. Then came that moment. Frank Lampard lifted a shot over Manuel Neuer. The ball hit the crossbar, bounced clearly over the line, but the referees didn't give it. Lampard was in shock, the England bench furious, and fans around the world stunned. Had the goal stood, who knows how the game might have turned out. Instead, England lost all momentum and crumbled to a 4-1 defeat. The injustice of that moment was so glaring that it finally pushed FIFA to introduce goal line technology, just too late for England. Number 5. Gerrard's costly slip. The 2013-14 season was the year for Liverpool. The Reds were playing some of the best football the Premier League had ever seen. Steven Gerrard was leading the charge. With just 3 games to go, the title was in their reach until Chelsea arrived at Anfield. Mourinho's side sat deep, waiting for their moment. Then came the nightmare. Just before half-time, Gerrard miscontrolled a simple pass, slipped, and Demba Ba pounced, racing through to score. Anfield was stunned. Liverpool desperately pushed for an equaliser but conceded again late on, losing 2-0. The title slipped away, just like Gerrard had. They finally won in 2020, but that moment remains one of football's most heartbreaking collapses. Number 4. Aguero's forced retirement. Some football goodbyes are grand, emotional spectacles, stadiums packed, fans chanting, legends walking away in glory. But Sergio Aguero's farewell? It was the complete opposite, a silent, heartbreaking end to one of the most lethal strikers football has ever seen. Aguero arrived at Barcelona in 2021, hoping to reunite with his best friend Lionel Messi and form a deadly partnership at the Camp Nou. But before he could even kick a ball in an official game, disaster struck. Barcelona's financial crisis forced Messi out, leaving Aguero stranded at a club in chaos. The dream was over before it had even begun. But then things took an even darker turn. Just weeks later, in a game against Alaves, Aguero suddenly clutched his chest, struggling to breathe. The stadium fell silent. The worst fears were soon confirmed. He had a heart condition that would force him to retire from football, effective immediately. A career that should have ended on its own terms, in front of thousands, instead faded away in silence. Number 3. Ghana's penalty heartbreak. The 2010 World Cup was a historic opportunity for Ghana, the last African team standing in the quarter-finals. Up against Uruguay, they were moments away from making history when a goal-bound header was blatantly blocked by Luis Suarez's hands on the goal line. Sent off, Suarez watched as Asamoah Gyan stepped up for the last-minute penalty, only to smash it against the crossbar. The final whistle blew soon after, forcing a penalty shootout that Ghana ultimately lost. But the image of Suarez celebrating wildly on the sidelines while Ghana's dream crumbled remains one of football's most gut-wrenching moments. Number 2. Southgate's miss. Euro 96 was supposed to be England's moment, a tournament on home soil, a team full of stars, and a country rallying behind them like never before. The Three Lions anthem echoed everywhere as Terry Venable's side looked destined for glory. They had played some fantastic football, and after overcoming Spain in the quarters, they faced old rivals Germany in the semis. Late in extra time, Paul Gascoigne was agonisingly close to tapping in a golden goal that would have sent England to the final, but he missed it by the length of a stud, leaving fans in disbelief. Then came penalties. One by one, England held their nerve until Gareth Southgate stepped up. His tame effort was saved, and moments later, Germany sealed their place in the final. The entire country was heartbroken, and the pain only deepened as England's wait for a major trophy stretches on. That wait, which stood at 30 years back then, continues today. Number 1. The national trauma. Brazil hosting the 2014 World Cup was supposed to be a fairy tale, a football-obsessed nation, a squad filled with talent, and Neymar, the golden boy, leading the charge. Everything was set perfectly for them to reclaim glory on home soil. And to be fair, they looked the part for most of the tournament. That was until disaster struck. In the quarter-finals against Colombia, Neymar suffered a brutal back injury that ruled him out for the rest of the tournament. And to make matters worse, their captain Thiago Silva was suspended for the semi-final. Then came that night against Germany. What followed was not just a defeat, it was a humiliation of historic proportions. Within 29 minutes, Brazil were 5-0 down. 5-0 in their own backyard. Fans in the stands were in tears, players looked shell-shocked, and the whole country watched in disbelief. By the time the final whistle blew, the scoreboard read 7-1. The dream was over, crushed in the most devastating way possible. This wasn't just a footballing loss, this was a national trauma. Well, that's all for this one. Let us know what is your most heartbreaking moment that you've ever experienced in football, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.